We don't need to do what was always done just because that was what was always done. We get to stop and say, hey, you know what would be better? Taking care of ourselves. You know what would be better? Taking advantage of things. When it comes to like the world of medicine,
Hey there, welcome to Unboxing It, a podcast by Lara Wellman and me, Rowan Knox. Each week we tackle societal ideas and expectations that can stop us from leading full and authentic lives. We're so glad you're joining us. Let's get started.
welcome to Unboxing It. I'm Lara.
And I'm Rowan.
And today we're going to start off with a little bit of a discussion about how we always have a discussion before we start recording. So we get on a call and theoretically we're going to start recording, and then it takes at least half an hour because we have things to say.
Yeah, at least we're always catching up first.
And we decide from our list of topics what we're going to talk about. And so today we picked our topic, and I said, hey, Rowan, do you want to introduce the topic?
And I said, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then I said, hey, did you say yes when you meant no?
And I said, yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did. And gosh, what I do like is that I now have started noticing when I do that and when other people do it. And I appreciate when people call me out on it. So hopefully you appreciated when I called you out on it.
Oh yeah, I did, because I really didn't want to intro this topic. And once we say what the topic is and why it's relevant right now, I think people will understand. But yeah, I'm not in a place to take lead on it this week.
Yeah. But we so often say yes because we think somebody wants us to do a thing. It's got a bit of a people pleasing nature to it, or I should do it. And so, yeah, we thought we'd mention that because it's a little bit of a thing I hope everybody starts to notice. Like, you don't have to say yes just because somebody asked you to do something. In fact, I would say the other person doesn't even always expect you to say yes, but sometimes you think they do, and therefore you have to say yes. And so taking a little bit of that away and just being like, no,
I like the way you said it too. No,
no,
no, no.
no.
I think you're right there. And that there's this idea, these habits are so ingrained in us, right? These people pleasing habits. And there's this idea that's like, well, I don't want to let you down. And I was running through my head. I'm like, how many have I introduced versus how many have you introduced the topic of it? Like, oh, okay, just say yes, 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 I will do it. Yes. And it's nice. I think it shows, honestly, we're not experts in a lot of the topics that we're talking about. And even if we were, experts also often become experts in a topic because they have lived experience in that topic. I know a lot about people pleasing, and I will tell you that most of the time I am quite good at setting boundaries these days. But I do fall into that, what if I let somebody down mentality, and I did today. So, yeah, thank you for calling me out on that.
No problem. We all do it, I think. We all do it. So it's just a good reminder. You don't have to say yes all the time. And I think, again, that the expectation isn't even always that somebody needs you to say yes when they ask you a question. But I think most of the time people believe it is. And I often like to remind people, like, it was just a question.
That's right. It's just a question.
So I am going to introduce the topic today, not Rowan. And we're going to talk about the difference between mental health and physical health and the kinds of help you can get with those, whether it's medication. I think it also follows through to other kinds of therapies you might get, but that they don't always feel the same. And it can feel harder to ask for help, to go get help, to start receiving help when it's on the side of mental health.
In a very big way.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit because Rowan and I both believe that in a like logic in our heads kind of way, that it shouldn't be different and that we should all go and ask for the kind of help we need when we need it and we deserve it and there's nothing to worry about. But in the sort of heart of the matter, in the sort of deep recesses of our brains of the matter, it can feel different and it can mean that we behave differently than what we would logically say to our friend in that kind of a situation.
I'm going to take you on a little story journey. Last week, I called Lara
Mhm,
and you invited me to call you while you were driving, running errands. And I was saying, I'm really not okay. I'm having a really hard time right now. So I'm going through a lot of stressors that I won't get into, but there's a ton. I have mentioned that I'm opening a business. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on in my life too. And I had had a discussion with my doctor a month or two ago about starting back on my anti-anxiety meds. I have generalized anxiety disorder. I also have health anxiety disorder, also known as illness anxiety disorder, also known as hypochondria. That was its former term. Basically, the fear that there's something wrong with me health wise all the time. And when stress gets really, really bad in my life, my brain will obsess
mhm,
very much on physical health issues, whether real or imagined, and blow them up and make them into these really big things where it's like, oh, I'm dying, right?
mhm,
Like, oh, my stomach hurts, it is stomach cancer. Oh, I have a headache, I have a brain tumor. Like all of these, it can never be something simple. It's always something that's really, really bad.
mhm.
And I will just spiral. I'll spiral for days and days and days. It's a horrible affliction, honestly. And I know, having talked to other people who have it, it can feel very much like a prison in your head. So why didn't I start those meds right away? I will get into that in a little while, but I will say that when I talked to you, Lara,
Mhm,
that conversation was what convinced me. I think when I was like crying to you on the phone, I really wasn't well. And you were so kind and gentle. And you gave me the advice that I would have given to my friend. I would have told you in that same situation, it is okay to go back on those meds and you don't need to struggle like this. And that ultimately led me to today, where thankfully this particular med I tend to take to really well. And within a few days, I start to feel better. And so it's been about a week now. And I do already feel a lot calmer and a lot happier. So I wanted to talk about this today because I think I'm not alone. In fact, I know I'm not alone because I shared this quite candidly online on my social media feeds, and the amount of people who reached out either privately or commented and said, thank you. I decided to go back on my meds too after reading this, or I've had a similar thing happen, or I'm really wrestling with this. There were so many, I can't keep track. So, this is a problem. We're not taking our mental health, I don't want to say as seriously, but we're not taking care of ourselves as a society, mental health wise, as much as we deal with other physical ailments.
I think that what it comes down to, and I don't know if it's a moral failing we're afraid of, but like there's something about our mental health where we believe, unlike physically, that we have the control to change it, right? So it's okay. I'm going to work through it. It's okay. I don't need this because if I just insert list of things, I'll have it under control. I won't need it. And I will say that during our conversation, you're the one who said, that meds could be the solution, right? Like I didn't say, "Hey, Rowan, why don't you take meds?" Right? Like that's not
Yeah.
right. When I asked you what you thought would probably help the most, you went directly to probably taking my meds, but acknowledging that there was a really big resistance to doing that. And I think that's the part. It's the resistance. Why do we resist it? What is it that we feel is the block? Because there are a lot of other medications that if our doctor suggested we take them, we would do it. I think blood pressure is one we've talked about. That being said, I do know people who are like, I need to exercise more, I need to change my diet, I have to stay off blood pressure medication as much as possible. So I do think it goes in different ways for different kinds of, I don't know if ailment is the right word, but there is resistance to certain things, even when we really believe we need that thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, for mental health anyway, comes down to this idea of being strong versus being weak.
Mhm,
And if you need help to feel better emotionally, then you're not strong enough. That is at the heart of a lot of this stuff. And when we were growing up, So a lot of the older generations too, these types of drugs were not available. SSRIs have been around, for example, and that's that SSRIs are a common group of drugs that are used to treat things like depression and anxiety. Most people, I would say, that are on medication still today are taking SSRIs, but there are a whole bunch of different family groups out there. But even SSRIs, which are some of the older ones, the first time I was ever introduced to them was the 90s,
Mhm,
and it was one of the earlier ones, and it had stronger side effects, and it left me within a few months not feeling so great on them, and I ended up going off them, which I think was, a decision I shouldn't have made back then.
mhm,
But unlike my blood pressure medication, so when I found out I have high blood pressure about a year or so ago, my doctor sent me home to try a few diet modifications. I already exercise a lot. I did everything by the book. I cut back salt, I cut back processed food, I exercised even more, I meditated, I did all these different things. And I went back in, and my blood pressure was slightly lower, but not within safe levels.
mhm,
And he said, Rowan, I think this is where we talk about medication. And I was like, okay, I have done everything I can genetically. I'm just predisposed to high blood pressure, like millions and millions of other people. I will take these meds. He said, Rowan, you'll be on these meds probably for the rest of your life. And I said, yep, that's okay. And I just started taking them, and that was that. And then my blood pressure went down, and I don't really think about it. I just take a little pill every day. Very different situation with a diagnosed anxiety disorder
mhm,
where I have gone off these meds, which work really well for me, by the way, several times. I think I've gone off them 3 times. And every time things get worse. I was fine this time. I talked to my doctor, talked to my therapist a few months ago, and they were like, yeah, this seems like a good time. Things are pretty stable. I said, great, I'm going to stop taking them. Stopped taking them, still felt great. And then the proverbial shit hit the fan. And my life blew up in all these different ways. It was a lot of stress. And so maybe for someone without an anxiety disorder, they still could have pushed through that with all the things I was doing: therapy, meditation, exercise, diet, sleep. I mean, I had it all covered: supplements, everything. Not me. I was a mess. I just started to spiral, and every week was worse than the last week. And I still wouldn't go back on my meds. And it really took getting so bad that I started to think, I don't want to be here anymore. This is torture in my brain. That's when I realized I had to go back on them. And I'm not proud of this because I am actually a mental health advocate. I really, really push for people to feel good and not feel shame around medication and not feel like they are less than for having to take this medication. But I also still got all of that messaging, and it is all in my head. And when I'm not well, I don't think straight, which makes it even worse.
I think it's really important for us to have this conversation because there comes a time where people in your audience, because you have a fairly large audience, I have an audience as well, and they start to get a picture that we have everything under control, life is great, everything is rainbows and unicorns. And the thing is, things still come up, even when you figured stuff out, like it's a good idea to be on medication, as an example. And then, we can talk ourselves into, but maybe it's not a good thing. Maybe I shouldn't be on it. Maybe I shouldn't go back on it. Like, we can come back to the same kind of stuff. And just because we know a thing doesn't mean we feel a thing, doesn't mean that our brains let us remember a thing in the moment of crisis. And so, talking about this, I think, is really important so that people don't think, oh, why am I in this situation again? Why do I suck for like not understanding the thing that I already figured out before? And it's because we cycle through things, and that's totally normal.
Yeah. It's hard for me to admit this stuff out loud sometimes. I have a hard time talking about health anxiety, for example, because I know logically it doesn't make sense. I know logically if I get a pain in my body, I just have a pain in my body, probably. And then if something is really wrong, I'm going to know because I'm going to have a lot of symptoms that point in that direction, usually. So to think to myself, oh, I woke up with a slight headache, that must be a brain tumor, and get scared about it all day long. that doesn't make sense. And I'm a logical person. I really am. So, when you're not well, when your brain is not well, it's going to tell you stories. And it can be really hard to open up about that. Like, I know after this, I'm going to have what Dr. Brene Brown calls a vulnerability hangover,
Mhm.
because I have just shared a whole bunch of things that I fear will have people judge me. At the same time, I also really know how important it is to hear these stories, because sometimes you need to hear from someone that maybe up until now you think has it more together than you realized and is also struggling. All those times in the last few months that I have been open on social media about opening a business and how excited I am, all of that is true. And about, being in a partnership and being in love and how excited I am, all of that is true. But also, every single day I was struggling. And I don't believe in curating my life online to look perfect. And I don't think that it's going to help someone else who needs to see that vulnerability.
Yeah. I think that, a lot of the time, a lot of the advice I even see about like sharing your story online is you don't really want to share the mess when you're in the middle of the mess. Like you can share it in some stages, but not all of it, right? Like, and not all of it needs to be public. Not all of it is even about you, right? Like we have stuff that's going on. So for me, I've been on medication a few times over the years. And the very first time I went on medication, I was about 35. And to that point, I had had some sort of really low periods, but it felt kind of like a badge of honor that I had never had to go on meds. I had survived without the meds until that point, which in retrospect, I don't know why that was the case. But then it was when my twins were toddlers. So I think they were about like 2.5. They still didn't sleep very well. The thing with twins that makes it more than twice as hard is that like they can go in two different directions. It's not like you're looking at two kids and managing them like in the same place. Like if they go in two different directions and you're one person, you're like, I don't know what
Oof.
to do right now, right? Like I only have
Yeah.
one me. And so I was getting more and more and more stressed out. And there was a day where I was basically lying on the floor crying. And I called my emergency people and my husband and some family. And I was like, somebody needs to come home. I am not okay. And it was in that moment I decided I need to talk to my doctor. And I got on meds and things got better. But it took like a really big crash out for me to be willing to do that. And it's because there is that part that feels like, oh no, I shouldn't need this. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's okay. I'm fine. And that is where this whole like, it's okay to ask for help. And I know that the times in my life where I've gone on medication, there have been external things that made life harder. So, toddler twins was really difficult. I still also had a 5-year old, and that's what pushed me over to too much. And then I went back on medication last year, I guess, because again, I have a whole bunch of stuff going on in my family, right? A whole bunch of external factors that made it so that I wasn't doing okay anymore. And so I was like, okay, it's time to go back on medication. And knowing that that's true, right? Like it really helps me to remember, like, okay, this is not just why am I not okay? Like all these things are happening. It's like just a little too much on me. I can't do it by myself. But my resistance to medication is, and you mentioned it a little bit, I have it in a slightly different way, which is I get a lot of side effects from almost every medication. So I know that now I'm taking on side effects. I don't have a med I can go back to and consistently be like, once I get through these side effects, I'll be okay. Like there's always some kind of crap. It's like trying some new medication. So that is a part for me. And I think a lot of people deal with the side effects with medications. And I wish it was simpler for people to figure out which one would work for them. But I think that the external parts, when it really is difficult because something's going on, not that you can't need them without that, helped me be okay with it. And I think we just need to acknowledge sometimes things are just a bit too much. And that's because we're human beings.
Sometimes things are a bit too much, and that's part of the reason I went back on meds. And as you just spoke to a little bit there, sometimes we have brains that have an imbalance and have always had an imbalance. I am quite sure that I have had an anxiety disorder since I was a child, but I was born in 1976. So we were not diagnosing children with anxiety disorders back then.
No.
Not usually, not unless something was really, really extreme. I kept a lot of this to myself. I wrote in my last book, One Sunny Afternoon, that I used to have, I didn't know they were panic attacks. I had no idea, but I used to have these panic attacks from the age of maybe 4 or 5 years old. And it was like the whole world would recede into this little tunnel. I get this tunnel vision. And sometimes I would forget who I was and where I was. I would completely dissociate, but I never told anyone because it was so scary. I didn't want to talk about it. So if I've had this my entire life, and it has manifested in various ways. I've had OCD like behaviors in my 20s and 30s. I had health anxiety in my 30s and 40s. Like it's always manifested in these different ways. My brain just doesn't function well without something to help it process that serotonin, right? And that's not a shameful thing. There are people who are born with heart defects. There are people who develop type 1 diabetes, juvenile diabetes when they're 8 years old. I mean, there's all these different things that happen, but for whatever reason, we are still to this day telling ourselves that that means that we should just tough it out. And you have a lot of influencers right now, and I'm seeing them, a lot of health influencers who are saying things like, if you just do all these things, you can go right off your medication and you'll be fine. And that is a very dangerous thing to be saying to people, as opposed to saying, yes, there are some situations where if you do things outside of medication, you don't need medication. That is true. It's kind of like diabetes management. There are people, not with type 1, to my understanding. I'm not a doctor, just want to say this, right off the bat. But there are people who maybe have type 2 diabetes who are able to manage it without insulin, regular insulin, right? That does happen sometimes. But not always. And if you need insulin, that's not a failure. And it is the same thing with any kind of mental health med. I think the other thing that I've noticed is older generations belittling younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, for being too soft. I don't know if you've seen that, Lara, but that has happened a lot. We're like, oh, they can't handle anything. Well, I think we should touch on that a little bit because I don't think that they can't handle anything. I think that they just know that they don't have to struggle.
Yeah. They actually are in touch with their feelings. And some of the things when the older generation say the younger one is too soft is simply that they have boundaries and they don't want to do more than they're capable of doing. And that's not the same thing.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, you're hearing about how younger millennials are really reshaping the workforce right now because they're refusing to work overtime for free.
Mhm.
They're refusing to answer emails at 11 p.m. They're refusing to go in on weekends unless they absolutely have to. As they should, because life is about balance. And just because we all did that, because that was what you had to do, doesn't mean that they should be doing that. Like, I think we've learned that that type of stuff leads to burnout. That type of stuff leads to depression and anxiety and all kinds of problems. So they're not too soft for setting those boundaries or for knowing when things get rough that they can go to their doctor and get some prescription help for that. They are just not wanting to suffer the way that we suffered when you don't need to suffer like that.
There's the whole live to work or work to live. And I think the older we are, the more we were trained to want to work hard all the time, to want to hustle. Like I would find myself years ago checking my email on vacation and being like, I would never want to not check it on vacation. It's not that I can't do the thing I really want to do because somebody's telling me to. I want to do it. And if you talk yourself into believing that that's what you want and that's the right thing, then it feels foreign to you when you see people not doing it. But a lot of younger people are saying, like, I don't live to work, right? Like, it's not my goal to be alive so I can work. I want to work so I have enough money to live. What a refreshing, different way to think about it. And like, I love this is the second time in this show. I didn't mention it the first time yet, but that I've thought about how people like to talk about the old ways and how great they were. before we had all these medications or, when people really understood the value of hard work. But like we have come far enough in our society where we have the privilege of having medications. We have the privilege of seeing that we don't have to work the fields every day, all day in order to do certain things. Like there's certain things that are different and we don't need to do what was always done just because that was what was always done. We get to stop and say, hey, you know what would be better? Taking care of ourselves. You know what would be better? Taking advantage of things. When it comes to like the world of medicine, the amount of times I've heard people going like, just eat an all natural, unprocessed diet and you'll be fine. I was like, no, I would have been dead at like 6 if I had been born hundreds of years ago, like from not having antibiotics. Like I got a lot of infections as a kid, right? Like there's certain things where we need to acknowledge medication has helped us. Vaccines have helped us. Having access to care has helped us. So I've gone into a couple of different directions here, but I'm just going to let you talk now because I've swirled myself around a bunch of things.
Oh, no. But they're all important things. I know someone in sort of that health sphere, having been a part of it myself, by the way, years and years ago, is going to listen to this podcast and be like, these two are being sponsored by Big Pharma, right? Like, I mean, I know that's going to happen. As somebody who is trans, I've been accused of getting Big Pharma bucks for somehow talking about being trans. It's wild. It's a wild, wild way of thinking. We are not being sponsored by anybody.
No.
No, no. But I do think on the flip side of setting all those boundaries, something that I really, really, really want to speak to as a person who's lived almost 50 years now is that the world itself is incredibly stressful in a way that it hasn't been in my lifetime. There are a lot of big stressors right now. There's the environment, there's the cost of living, there is a housing crisis that is hitting all kinds of countries around the world, including ours in Canada. There are hostile governments. I don't need to name them, I don't think, but there's one just south of us that is making life very, very scary and unpredictable for a lot of people, even if you don't live in that country.
Mhm.
We just never know from day to day what's going to happen, right? So on top of everything else going on in our personal lives, there is a baseline anxiety and overwhelm that a lot of us are experiencing. And we might have made that our new normal right now. It's like, okay, because humans are adaptable. We go, oh, so this is where we're at. Okay, I can make peace with that. All right. Well, I still have to live. I still have to go to work. I still have to do this. But like, it is not a good time to be okay in your head. And if you are okay in your head right now, I'm really happy for you. Like I'm
Mhm.
truly, truly happy for you. Most of the people I talk to in my circles are not doing okay. And a
Yeah.
lot of people have gone back on meds or stepped up their meds or started therapy because, we've talked a lot about meds, but there are all different kinds of ways to take care of your mental health. I'm a big fan of all of them. I also have a wonderful therapist who I see from time to time still. I do think there are definitely some ways to manage, but we are in I don't want to say it's a crisis, but it feels kind of like a crisis, doesn't it? There's a lot happening right now. The world is changing in a way that is so fast and so unpredictable. So if you are not okay right now, it is understandable. That's what I want to say.
Yeah. There's a lot going on. I think the last couple of decades been particularly good. There have certainly been really bad ones many times in the history of human beings, but the last few decades have not been some of them. And now we're getting back into some of the stuff that I think a lot of us thought we would never get back to. A lot of us
Yeah.
were like, that's done. We're done with that kind of stuff. And now it's like, what do you mean it can just happen again? What do you mean it can get bad again? Like, this is not a thing that we ever entertained, right? Like, it's not like we were trying to be in denial. Like, we never entertained the idea. Like, it was never something that ever came up. What if everything falls apart again? I was like more inclined to think, I mean, I'm sort of joking, but maybe not. But like the whole, apocalyptic, like aliens invading, who knows, right? Like, but you're like, oh, something with the environment, something going wrong that way, like, is more likely than what's happening right now. Like, this never was something that I considered. And now we're here and it's stressful. Of course, it's stressful. And like, I hate the argument, like, it's not even happening to you. Like, yes, it's happening to the entire world. There is nobody on the earth that isn't somehow impacted by the change in the actual environmental climate and political climate. We're all impacted in some way.
Yeah, every single person. Whether you turn the news on or not. Well, turn the news on. Why I sound really old now. I don't even turn the news on. I read the news or I watch the news on an app. But like regardless, I I'm not turning the news on anymore. But like whether or not you're paying attention or
Mhm.
not, this is permeating everybody's life to some extent. It is stressful. It might be our new normal right now. And there's a certain level of acceptance I think that we have to have that there are things beyond our control. Most of us in the world are not in a position as an individual to change what's happening. We can all work together, and that's a whole other episode. As an activist, I could go into that. But as a human being just trying to survive in this day and age, there isn't a whole lot I can do. So I do what I can and also accept that it is a very stressful time. And I check in on a lot of my friends. That's what I've been doing. I've been checking in on people. How are you? How are you doing? And I've gotten a lot of, I'm not okay. And I really appreciate that you checked in right now and we'll have a chat because it's hard. It's really hard. I am really glad that I went on my medication again. I think that's going to be the boost that I need to get through this really stressful period of time in my life. But I'm also planning on staying on it indefinitely now. I think I have tried a few times to wean myself off when things have been better, only to find that it's not better long term. I have a very busy life. There's a lot of people in my life. There's a lot of things that go on. My job itself as an activist is a very stressful one at times. And it's all right that I just stay on these now until whenever, maybe forever.
Yeah. And it doesn't make you a lesser person. It doesn't make you a weaker person. Knowing, like everything down to the fact that you and I had a conversation and you were willing to say, I'm not okay. Right. Like all of these things are some steps that people struggle with. So that's what I really hope again, like whenever most of these conversations, I hope that having the conversation, talking about these things, lets people understand and that it normalizes a little bit more how common it is, how different people are feeling, that it's not always easy, and that it's okay to ask for help, right? That you don't have to do things alone, that you're not a better person or a more impressive person if you figured out how to feel better without asking for help. And I really believe that asking for help is just a great way to sort of hack life, right? Like use the people and the resources around you to make life easier. Don't feel like you have to do it alone. Like it's not weak. I think it's smart.
I think it is too. I think that actually shows a lot of strength to be able to say, I'm going to try and internalize this as I say it. Okay. So, like, this
Mhm.
is something I would say to anyone listening, and I would mean it with my whole chest, by the way. Everything I'm saying, if I said it to you, I would mean it. I don't always internalize it. It is a strength of character, it is a strength, it is a resilience to be able to understand that we are not fully independent human beings and that we exist in a society for a reason. We are communal, and there are people that we can go to get help with certain things that we ourselves cannot fix. So, me going to my doctor and getting that medication, me reaching out to my lovely co host and saying I'm not okay and I need to go back on my medication and talking that through. That was a strength. That shows incredible resilience. And frankly, one day, hopefully, I will be very proud of myself for doing it.
I'm very proud of you. And I hope that anybody else, if you have somebody that you can reach out to, if you're feeling not okay, please do it. People love to help. People love to help when they can. Use your resources, use your people. Don't feel like you have to do everything by yourself because you're amazing and nothing takes away from that.
I just want to end it there because that was beautiful.
And let's end it there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Unboxing It. We're so glad you did. If you like what you heard and you want to help us keep making episodes, please leave us a rating wherever you heard this one. You can also subscribe to the Unboxing It Substack to get access to all of the latest news and some special bonus content. And hey, truly, don't forget to find some moments of joy today. You deserve them. Take care out there, and we'll see you next time.